and welcome to this week's IG Live. Today I'm excited to be talking to Stephanie Wildman and Cecilia Pópulus-Eudave, and we're going to be talking to them about their new book that focuses on Day of the Dead. You may be familiar with Stephanie's work through books like Brave in the Water, and also to her series on twins. Things other than write children's books. So maybe tell us about what that was like for you getting started with children's books.
Of course. Yeah. Hi. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's very, very exciting. Let me just start by saying that I did meet Stephanie through my husband, who's a massage therapist in San Francisco, and they hit it off really well. And then she introduced me to her, found out that I speak Spanish and I can translate and everything. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
So then she was always interested. She's an author. Interested. She asked me would I be interested in translating them, and I said, of course. Yeah, let's investigate that. And then, my background has been in San Francisco. I used to have a cable access show with music, so I bring in local bands, and they would come into our show, and that was a lot of fun. And then I just said, I really want to put my Spanish skills to work, and this working with Stephanie and translating her books has been just, a great windfall for me. It's just been so exciting, and be able to use my language skills has been just an honor. What can I ask for? It's been sensational. So really grateful for that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And Stephanie, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how you got started writing children's books?
Sure. I'm Stephanie Wildman, and how lucky am I to get to work with Cecilia. My Spanish is kind of más o menos, so it's really nice to have someone who really knows what they're talking about. So I began by taking a class from Maxine Rose Schur, who is a wonderful writer. Check out her books. And I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators and the 12 by 12 Picture Book Challenge, which are picture book spaces, and also the Writer's Grotto, which is a writing community across all different genres. So all of those help keep me in touch with the joy of writing.
And you've written a number of books now. I was just showing before, of course, there's Brave in the Water. You have Miri's Moving Day, which also just came out, which was co-authored with Adam Ryan Chang. And then the series we're here to talk about today about the twins, Flor and Roberto, and their big brother Luis, which the latest in the series, which you both are co-authors on, is Ghostwriter or Escritor Fantasma. So Stephanie, tell us about the book and what was the inspiration behind it? Or I don't know whether you want to talk about the book specifically or about the whole series. Yes, thank you.
So Ghostwriter came together through a few different strands. I had never really meant to write a series. The first book was Treasure Hunt. And those characters I loved them. And I had always wanted to write a body scan story to help children go to sleep. And now that I had these great characters that Estefanía Razo, the wonderful illustrator, drew with twins, a body scan, going down the two arms and the two legs. So that story came together. But with Ghostwriter, my grandson who lives in North Carolina, their family had a dog named Julio who died. And for months, every time I would call, he'd say, "Grandma, did you know Julio died?" And I would always say, "Yes, it's really sad." But I realized that he really needed a way to process this loss. And as I said, then I was working on these other books with Estefanía, and I thought, how much fun would it be for her to get to draw these characters in costumes for Halloween and for Dia de los Muertos? And then, then there was this dog who died and Dia de los Muertos. And then I was interviewed by the author and podcaster Gina Soldano, and her website lists her as, author, podcaster, and it also said ghostwriter. And that's when all of these ideas kind of came together. And so the first thing I did, of course, was I called up Cecilia and we talked about the possibility of weaving this into a story.
I love it. because we were talking before we got started about how you two met and the fact that with a traditional publisher, this relationship would have never, been able to blossom and develop into something else like it is now, because you probably would not have even been in contact or known each other. So Cecilia, can you talk a little bit more about, kind of your journey? You've been a translator for Stephanie on earlier books. What was it like to work on it now as a co-author? Because I'm assuming you felt like you already knew these characters so well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was a great honor to be asked to co-write the book with Stephanie. It was great having direct input regarding the development of the characters and the storyline, and researching the tradition of Dia de los Muertos and weaving them into a story that children would be able to understand and learn from was a joy. So Stephanie is very welcoming to new ideas and my suggestions. At first when she told me that the dog's name was Julio, and I said, well, in Mexico, you really don't name your pets after, a proper name. It's just kind of weird. And she's like, no, but like my grandkids actually had a dog named Julio. And I'm like, okay, well then that changes. Then it's absolutely fine, right? So to be able to go back and forth, and fleshing out the characters and how they would react and how they would intermingle with each other and how they would handle this culture and the grieving process of losing a pet was very, very interesting for me. And it was a great way to give children, I think, an outlet of mourning and grieving. They see that as something that is not just happening to them. It's a common thread, and here's a way that you can honor the person, the loved one that you lost, by keeping their memory alive through tradition. Yeah, so it was an experience, definitely.
Can you talk a little bit more about what the process is? I'm always curious when I see people have co-authored a book, how that actually works as far as, you talk about the back and forth. Do you two meet often over Zoom? Did you meet in person? What was that like? Maybe Stephanie, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I've done a lot of co-authoring with a lot of different people, and the process is always different. Cecilia and I have become friends, and so it was just the most natural of things. I mean, I think we began by just talking, not even on Zoom, but on the phone, and just asking each other a lot of questions. Like as the examples she gave, like Julio was the name of this lost pet.
Right.
And I think we both wanted to be true to the spirit of both Dia de los Muertos and Halloween, and have the text be rich with references to specific aspects of the holiday, like the marigolds, like the costumes, like having an altar, like introducing La Katrina, who a lot of people might not have ever heard of.
Is this something I'm just curious how much is say Dia de los Muertos kind of something that you were very familiar with ahead of time for either one of you, or was this something you had to do a lot of research on?
Well, it was it's very interesting because in Mexico the sort of traditions have started shifting away. We're shifting away from Dia de los Muertos and more towards Halloween, right? So there was, I think there was a very active movement to say, no, let's go back to what it means to us, was part of our tradition, our culture, Dia de los Muertos. So I was always familiar with it, but I remember, like in my home, my mom would never put up an altar, right? It wasn't her tradition to do it, but my grandmother did. So I pulled from that and started putting an altar in my home on Dia de los Muertos and telling my mom about it. And she was like, oh, that's really awesome that you're doing that. I just don't know why I never got into that tradition. So it wasn't a lot of research, but I did do a lot of talking with my, cousins who are contemporaries, who are modern kids, let's say, youngsters living here who are architects and engineers and stuff. And I go, do you guys put up an altar? They're like, no, but I want to start doing it again.
Mm.
So in talking to them about it, well, how do you do it? Who do you put on there? What do you put on the altar? So they are going back to putting the marigolds, and they are going back to doing what we call the papel picado, which is the cutouts of the paper, what it represents. And so I think all cultures are kind of like going, wow, what a cool tradition, because we all have somebody who has passed, right? I think that's why the movie Coco was so popular, because it's so beautiful to look at, but there are underlying themes, It's like, don't forget those who came before you, and it's very interesting. And just really quickly, I think about the Finding Your Roots shows and the beautiful people finding your roots. And the common thread through all of these, and my family included, is there's so many secrets. I didn't know my grandfather did that. I didn't know my great grandmother came from here and she married this person. So for whatever reason, families do keep secrets, and that's fine. But it's great to share the knowledge and share who your ancestors were, because your kids are going to want to know eventually. And that's why, these genetic offerings that are out there are so popular, right? Like 23andMe, send us your sample, we'll tell you who you are. Well, you got your little abuelita over here and your little abuelito over there that they can tell you. So it's very, very interesting to me that's become so popular, that we all have the power to share our ancestry and our traditions and our culture. And I think this book does that, helps with that, definitely.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's so interesting. Like you said, there is a real interest in this now. And what do you think it means in particular for children to be able to read a book like this that helps them connect to these traditions, kind of ground them in the past? Maybe, does one of you want to address that? Cecilia, I know you've already kind of mentioned that, or do you want to talk a little bit more, maybe Stephanie, about why you wanted to include that in this book?
Well, the family in North Carolina has Latin roots as well, and so it made sense to me to have that be part of the story. But it isn't my holiday, so I've learned a lot from working on it and with Cecilia. But we talk a lot in the children's book world about mirrors and doors. So it is so important for children to see themselves in books, their own holiday, to see it represented. But it's also important, if it isn't their holiday, to see it, so that they can walk through the door and understand, what else is going on and appreciate that. So I think that it clicks all those boxes, I think, in that sense. And I think that Read Your World, which I don't know if I started by saying how much I appreciate all the work you do, Liana, for it, that I think you have resources on other books on Dia de los Muertos. Jolene Gutierrez, the ofrenda that we built, comes to mind. So I think that would be, this isn't the only book. There's lots of books that could be looked at.
Right. I love how you draw inspiration, how both of you really are drawing inspiration from your own families. I just want to give a brief mention to Miri's Moving Day, which I believe is also inspired by another child, with Chinese and Jewish, which is again another kind of combination you don't often see in children's books. So I think that's amazing. And to go back to what you're talking about grief and how the grieving a pet, which is something that's so common, so many kids go through, and based on conversations with your own grandson, what do you want children to take away from the book, especially in terms of that?
Well, for one thing, of course, I want children to read. I think having children be readers is maybe the primary thing to take away from this book or any book. Debbie Ridpath Ohi has a book called I Want to Read All the Books. I want children to want to read all the books. But, and actually Carrie Gonzalez also has a book, How to Hatch a Reader. So, these are just great resources for reading in general. But for Ghostwriter itself, I hope that children do see that thinking about happy memories can help with the sadness that they feel. I mean, it's okay to feel sad. It's important to have that grief. but talking about it and then also going to a happier place with the memories, I think can be very healing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I totally agree. And it's really interesting because I decided not to just have the altar during October or November, but to have it up all year round, really. I created, a little book with pictures of people who have passed, and then people look at it and we talk about them and tell stories. So for a child, because everybody has a picture, I would think of, like their mom or something, somewhere in the house is, oh, my parents went on a cruise or something. And so for the kid to come up and be like, oh, well, who's that? Well, that's your grandma and grandpa. And then you start talking about them and tell stories about them. And there's the connection again. So it is, Dia de los Muertos is remembrance, but it could be year round too. So to teach the children, it's not, you can remember them all the time, just not on the specific day. They're always with you, not just in October and November. So you want to take away that it's okay to think about them all the time and to be sad if it comes up, during dinner on a Wednesday night, I'm thinking about grandma and I really miss her. And it's just like, well, let's talk about her a little bit. So keep her in the forefront, keep her with you close by, and they'd say, as long as you're remembered, you're never going to die or pass or be forgotten. So as long as someone still remembers you, it's all pretty awesome.
Can we talk a little bit about the older brother, Luis? Because he's one of my favorite characters because he just seems like such a wise older brother. So I'm curious, is he based on someone in particular, or does he, why have the older brother versus say like a parent giving this kind of this message?
So at the start of the series, I had written the story that became Treasure Hunt, the first book, for a green contest, an ecology type, and it's about recycling and reusing and all of those. And it was a child and a grandmother, because my first book was a child and a grandmother. And I thought, oh, those are the books I'm going to write, a child and a grandmother. So I've mentioned my grandchildren so many times, that's really important to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, that story did not win the contest. It did not go anywhere. And so I thought, well, but maybe it could be a picture book. And, then I did create the twins. So it was the twins and a grandparent. And my wise teacher, Maxine, who I mentioned, she read it and she said, if you can ever take an adult out of a children's book, take them out. And so the grandmother got axed. and the wise big brother came in.
That's so interesting. I wonder why maybe children just like looking up to older kids, that would be better to have in there, you think?
I hadn't thought of it. It was her idea, but it really did, I think, make the story work better. Although my critique group, there's another book coming, and in that one, we see Luis getting some grandparent love because he does take that adult role, right. And we want people to see he is still also a child.
Oh, I love that. When is that book coming out? Do you know, or do we know yet?
October 14th.
Yeah.
First, Cecilia has to work on the Spanish translation, which she can't do till we finalize the illustrations, which is why Estefanía sends her best, but she's working on a deadline, so she can't be here. But I do have to brag a little because that book, it's called Story Power, is co-authored with one of my grandchildren, Simon Wildman Chang, and he's the co-author because it was his idea.
Yay.
I had no intention of there being another book. I'm writing something else. And he's like, Grandma, I have an idea for another Floriberto and Luis story. I was like, okay, what's your idea? Well, it was a great idea. I can say that because it wasn't mine.
How old is your grandson?
Well, he's 8 now. He was 7 at the time.
Wow, that's amazing.
But you were asking about processes of co-authoring. I mean, again, this is a completely different process, although he's on the Zoom and meeting Estefanía and asking her questions about how she's going to do the illustrations. But we would sit there with the draft and he'd hold his pencil and he'd like circle words and say, this one isn't right here. He's a true co-author. And even on the illustrations, he found an error in the sketches that all the grown-ups missed, but he caught it because he's the right age for this.
That's amazing.
It's
And
so
what a
much
great
fun.
experience. How does he enjoy it? Like, what does he think about this?
You know, I think he thinks it's just normal.
Yeah, that's what you do. Yeah.
Grandma writes books and I'm writing one with her. Like, doesn't everybody do this?
Well, we have a little time. I was wondering, we beforehand you were mentioning some about your experience with this particular publisher, which sounded really amazing. Could you guys talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's something that's nice to kind of pull back the curtain to let people know there's such a range of experiences you can have in the publishing world that I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, it's really true. I used to do a little work in fundraising, and they used to say, if you've been to one foundation, you know one foundation.
Mm.
And I think the same is true in publishing. So the publisher for this series is Lolly Publishing, and it's a small woman-owned company. And that, I think, influences their approach, which when I was offered my first contract, they did a Zoom and they asked me, how do you see the book? Well, what a concept to ask the author how they see the book. And then they bring on the illustrator, and with Cecilia, we were all together talking about how we saw the book. I have to brag about Estefanía because her illustrations are just so amazing in all of the books. But since Cecilia and I thought, well, wouldn't she love to do costumes?
Yes.
And here they are, the characters all dressed as El Catrine and La Katrina, and here's Luis in his ghost rider costume. And I don't know, Cecilia, do you want to talk about the altar a little bit that's in the book? I was going to show it if you wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know, can we get close enough for people to see it?
Photo. That's my parents are represented, which I was very honored and loved the way that Estefanía would do that for
we
me.
get close enough for people to see that.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's pretty.
So
Yeah, I was really happy with it.
And whose idea was it to do that? Whose idea was that to include your parents? Besides,
I think it was Stephanie's, and then I said, yeah, that's a great idea if Estefanía has time to do it, because it was kind of like one of the last additions to her illustrations, and Estefanía was in agreement. So I said, okay, that's awesome. That would be great.
oh, that says.
And another, excuse me, my cousin, I gave her this book for Christmas, and she read it. It made her cry. She read it to her two children who are 4 and 6 at the time. And then she recommended to the teachers at her school, and they have it now in their library. So that was very exciting. And she thought it was an amazing book, and both Lucas and Mateo really enjoyed it. So that's like from the mouth of babes.
Yeah.
It was great.
That's the highest recommendation, because kids, they'll tell you what they really think, so that they enjoyed it. Oh, and we have a question. What's the title of the book? Is Ghostwriter, also available in Spanish as Escritor Fantasma. And if you haven't read it, this is actually the latest in a series of books with the same characters, which are Treasure Hunt, and I'm blanking on what's the name.
Breath.
Yeah, Breath by Breath. If you wanted to check out the earlier ones as well. And so, Stephanie, we're coming up on the end. If you want to talk about your other projects coming up, I know you mentioned there's going to be another book in this series, Story Power. And you have Miri's Moving Day, which is already out. Do you have any other projects you'd like to mention?
The other one is still in the computer, so I don't know if it's worth mentioning or not.
But still picture books? I mean, you think you'll...
Well, no, I'm working on a middle grade. We'll see if it ever sees the light of day. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, I think the joy of writing, and the best things are when some of the readers write me notes or send me a picture. I mean, I had one little girl who hadn't been reading, and then she got one of these books and loved it so much. Her aunt, I think, sent me the picture and said, here she is with the bookmark she made for it. and
Oh,
she just reads it over and over again. And that goes back to what I said about making readers. That's really, I think, the best.
that's so special. How about you, Cecilia? Now that you've done this, do you think you want to write more?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm really happy that Stephanie opened the door for me. So it's great. No, it's been a fantastic experience. Lolly's publishing has been amazing. Everyone's so responsive and helpful. Yeah, it's been a good experience. So yes, why not? Absolutely.
I love it. Well, thank you both for taking the time to talk with us today. This was so much fun.
Oh,
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And for anybody, if you joined us late, as always, this is going to be up on Instagram in a few minutes, and later we will have it up on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can join us every week, usually Thursdays at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. But watch for the announcements every once in a while. We have to do a different time. Yes, and there's the book Ghostwriter, again, also available in Spanish. And thank you both. This was so great to talk with you. And thanks for everybody for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everyone.